thank you guys for joining us today on Facebook Live. My name is Brandon Jinx Jenkins, producer and host at Complex, as well as All Things Pigeons and Planes. Today I'm very excited to be discussing the HBO docuseries The Defiant Ones, the true story of the improbable and wildly successful partnership between Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine. The docuseries premieres on Sunday, July 9th and runs consecutive evenings until Wednesday, July 12th. And the first for HBO will be made available in its entirety on HBO streaming platforms, HBO Go, HBO Now, affiliate portals, HBO On Demand. If you're like myself, you like to binge watch, trust me, it's the way to go. So first I want to introduce our guests, Director Alan Hughes and Mr. Jimmy Iovine himself. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Great.
Guys, I'm huge fans of all that you guys have done, what you guys contribute to the culture, so I have a lot of questions for you today. But first, I want to speak to the audience that's watching at home. We encourage you guys to join the discussion by adding your questions into the comments section, sharing this video, and make sure that you add your questions in because we'll be answering them here on Facebook Live with the talent.
So this is live?
This is live.
All the way live?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like they're home watching us right now.
Live.
Yeah.
No cursing?
I'm going to assume there's no cursing here.
Okay.
Yeah.
No cursing.
So, gentlemen, I got a chance to watch the docuseries, and I was blown away from the episodes I got a chance to see. The way you guys structured, the way you guys put everything together, and the stories that you told, and not just your accomplishments, but like who you and Dr. Dre are as people, and I imagine you as well because it's the harmony that works. Can you tell the audience about the Defiant Ones? I saw it, but they haven't seen it yet.
Alan made it, so he has a 30,000 point of view of it.
You're a pretty big part of it, though.
It's about Jimmy and Dre.
Yeah.
I found that the reason why I wanted to do it originally is because I was going to make a documentary on Dr. Dre, and he's such an enigmatic figure. Everyone wanted to know about Dr. Dre, and there's this great mystery to him. So I don't know how I got him to agree to do it, and then I found out that Jimmy was making a documentary on Interscope Records.
I was thinking about it.
Right? And called Jimmy up and said, what would you think? Because I was just as interested in The Wizard of Oz as Dr. Dre, because he's always worked behind the scenes and created such magic with artists on his own, and there was a history that people didn't know about with Jimmy and the hip-hop culture, I would say.
Oh, for sure.
In his rock career as a producer in the 70s and 80s. So that was very interesting to me, and how to blend those two stories together. So we were fortunate enough to get Jimmy to agree after a year. It took a long time to convince him.
Well, I agreed once I heard Dre was going to talk, so I figured can't lose this moment. He may change his mind next year.
For sure. Like I said, I got a chance to watch a pretty decent amount of it. One of the first scenes that jumps out to me is it's pretty early on. It's the moment that the Apple and Beats deal comes together and it's announced. I did a report on this at my job. It's one of my favorite moments ever because it's so celebratory and it means a lot for music, tech, hip hop. But it's a tense moment behind the scenes.
No kidding.
It came prematurely.
You think?
Tyrese is crip walking. Like it's amazing. But on your end, it's a little tense. Why start the doc with such an emotional moment?
That was a Facebook posting, right?
Yeah, it was there. Yeah, and it did land on Facebook, and that's how I saw it.
Jimmy, what happened? What happened? And you were making the deal? It was private?
Well, we were. Well, they asked you why we started with it, so that's a filmmaker's question.
He's good.
Separation of church and state. Go ahead.
Yeah.
That's your question.
Why we opened with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a
you know what's funny? It's
I have
interesting.
no idea
because
why
that was the first scene I showed Jimmy because I was terrified of it. I didn't know if we were even going to be able to go there, even though he's talking about it, and we thought we would put it in part 4. And it wasn't too fairly recently, like maybe 10 months ago, I figured out that's the best way to enter and show you what these guys' relationship really means, because if they made it through that, and they've made it through far more dangerous, real danger.
Yeah.
And that delivers on the promise of we're not making a fluff piece. You see how ridiculous that was, that moment, and it could have all gone away. And the fact that they made it through that together, it said a lot about their friendship and their bond, and that's the way to start this movie and deliver on that promise,
It's so interesting to gain just insight of what happens behind the scenes. We catch it on the receiving end, but I can't even imagine what those nerves must have been like.
Well, it was the end of a lot. It was heading toward the end of a lot of work. I felt that Apple is the one company that can scale subscription music streaming. I felt that We really needed them in that game. So I worked very hard to try to get them to do it with Beats Music, to bring us in and do it. And, Apple's a very secretive company. It's a very respectful company. And it leaked. And when it leaked, as you see in the documentary,
it was a moment.
I called Dre and said, I'll put it lightly, I said, be careful this weekend.
Yeah.
And somebody took a video of them celebrating and leaked it, and it was a drag. But you know what? What really the only thing that felt good about that was the fact that Apple were the people I thought they were, and they understood popular culture, and they understand how things get done, and they have a feel for it because Steve Jobs embedded in it. It's the cross section between technology and liberal arts. And what you saw there were guys that understood. And they said, okay, I get what this is. Let's just keep going.
Wow.
And to add to that, the interesting thing about that moment, or that Tyrese Facebook moment where it was crazy, that's a hip-hop moment.
Yeah.
So in an absurd, ironic way, that's what Beats.
It's just, it's very indicative of the culture. It's very hip-hop, yeah.
And Dre hadn't had a hip-hop moment in 18 years.
He is
so
hip-hop.
give him credit for that.
Yeah, he just breathes it. Another early scene was where one of your subjects was asking you when the doc was going to come out, and you said sometime next year. Mm-hmm. How long was this process? How long were you guys creating?
Well, initially, when I said we got the green light to do this, it was 4 years ago.
Wow.
And then Jimmy came around about a year later, so it's been over 3 years. We started shooting this thing before Straight Outta Compton was even a script, or greenlit. We started shooting this thing before the Apple deal. Jimmy kept telling me to have my cameras ready in May, I believe you were saying, or something. Remember. And before they became billionaires, we were rolling cameras before all this happened. So over 3 years. Yeah.
Well, it's over 3 years. As I said, off camera, there's a mystique that surrounds you and Dr. Dre. Why now? Why is now the moment to let cameras in?
Why? Why? When I do anything, the most important question is why.
Yeah.
And it's the most important question I ask people, and it's the biggest question I ask myself. And I knew why I was going to do something at Interscope, because I felt Interscope in the 90s took popular culture and blasted it and moved it around the world as well. It was an international thing. And it was a very hairy time, but it was most incredible experience. So once I called Dre and I said, Dre, because I was asking myself the same question. I said, why do this, right? What, and but then when Dre was willing to sort of come out and talk about this stuff, I said, if we don't do this now, he'll never do this. And I think it needed to be done.
Yeah. There's a true partnership between the two of you, and I think it comes across very strong in the doc. But you guys are very diverse, too. Your backgrounds, your upbringing, even your careers prior to where you guys intersect. What's the strength of that diversity, of that dichotomy between the two of you?
Well, here's the deal. We know what each other does. We know what our strong suits are. So when we talk, we've never had a fight. We've had arguments. But we kind of know the balance of where the other person sits. So I know when Dre, he always says no to everything. Yes. But I know when it's a no with a capital N or a no with a little n. And I work in that dynamic, and he knows me that when I want to do something, I think it's the right thing to do, he just has a feel for how I move. And we've always been able to, more than not, get the right decision made.
Alan, what have you observed about the two of them in your time entrenched with them over the last few years?
Hundreds and hundreds of things. Be specific.
The things you can share, yeah.
Oh, man. Just that. One thing about their partnership that I found interesting is that, and I've seen many partnerships, is that the other one's not envious of what the other one does. They both respect and appreciate that he does what he does, I do what I do, and they complement each other perfectly. I don't see any, I don't know. It's inexplicable. That's why I wanted to do the movie. You have to see it in action, and even in the film, it's 4 parts. You understand a lot more about it, and they have they have 2 major things in common.
What I think Alan accomplished in the film is you watch this thing, and I think in the history of entertainment, I don't believe there's ever been anything as volatile as happened to Interscope and Death Row Records in the 90s. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's ever been anything like that, you know? And what Alan was doing, and so Dre and I staying together through that, you could look at it from your different perspective and say, why? But what he did at the beginning of the movie is he answers that question in episode 1 and 2 for you, and then it answers it again in episode 4. And that's the magic of this film, is how he did that. Because, you know, I didn't know really Dre's life, and he didn't know mine, but Alan studied both. And the way he put it together is it's a phenomenal thing.
I'm glad you brought that up. What was the most surprising thing you learned about Dre throughout this process, or maybe even watching the footage back?
Well, the most surprising thing is that he talked about it. You know, I mean, this guy doesn't go there.
He's involved.
He does not go there. You know, he's not on, let's put it this way, he's not on Instagram all day, okay? He doesn't want anybody to know where he is. And so the thing that I learned is that what his intent was didn't always come out in his actions. So watching the film, because I wasn't there for his interviews or anything like that, the only thing I saw was when Alan made the film and showed it to us. I learned a lot about it through his mother, through his friends, and I said, okay, there's a whole, as well as I know this guy, there is a side of him that I still don't know. And I was really impressed with it, and that was just, you know, a surprising thing to me, that I was able to learn that much about my partner and my friend for 25 years, you know, on a TV screen.
And I think as a fan of music in general, I learned a lot even watching some of the footage that you included, and I imagine you and Dre had to release of these early studio sessions, like classic records, you know, footage that we've never seen, and without this we wouldn't see it all. What did you leave on the cutting room floor?
Oh, let's not get Jimmy upset right now.
Yeah, I saw that head turn real quick.
Some of his greatest hits were left on the cutting room floor.
Maybe not that kind of footage, but just anything that you really wish you could squeeze in. But
there's a story about with him and Bruce Springsteen I wish we could have included in when he finished Born to Run and mastered the album, and it was a torturous process. And it was his first real learning experience. And I'll let him tell the story and what happens. It's his story.
Well, what happened was, in the movie, we go right up to this point, and it was a very arduous album to make. It was very painful, and I learned my work ethic from Bruce, because he just doesn't stop and doesn't compromise. When I mean doesn't stop, if you saw the first episode, it's unbelievable how intense.
He's from Jersey.
Okay.
That's how we move.
All right. So at the end, the album's finally mixed. It took 9 days to mix it. And it was so crazy that one day, I probably slept like an hour or two a night, maybe some nights not at all. Because we had to get the album mixed in 9 days because they were out of money. They had to go on the road. So remember one day we were mixing a song called She's the One, and I couldn't stay. I just couldn't. My ears were gone. They were jammed up from the volume being, because they keep turning the volume up as you're mixing. And I remember doing that song, and I looked at my assistant. I must have had tea, coffee, every thing you can possibly try, short of stuff that I just wasn't trying at the time. And I just looked at my assistant, and he was chewing gum. I said, "What is that?" He said, "It's Wrigley's gum." I said, "Give me a piece of that." And I took it, and I remember his face. I threw the gum in the garbage, and I took the aluminum foil, and I chewed it. You ever put aluminum foil on a cavity?
No, never.
It feels like the electric chair.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, and that's how I got through the mix, and that was the next to last mix. So then I had to go master the album, and that got me 3 hours.
Wow.
And so, because the more you chew it, the more it hurts. And pain will wake you up.
For sure.
You know, it's hard to sleep through pain. We
Yeah.
all know that. So I mastered the album, and then I took a train to where he was in Baltimore. And I was with a buddy of mine because I didn't want to go all the way to Baltimore by myself. And I went to him. He didn't have a record player, so we had to go to a stereo store. So we walk in this store, and Bruce asked the guy, "Can we play a record in here?" The guy says yes. He has no idea who Bruce Springsteen is. Wow. We put it down and we listen to it. And I don't know what the speakers sound like. So I don't know if the speakers are good, bad, in phase, out of phase. I don't know what they are. So he's listening like this. I'm trying to talk to him. He's completely ignoring me. And he's just sitting there staring at the speakers. We go back to the hotel. He was in one of those motel things where the pool is right next to the room. He walks over to the pool, has the record that I just mastered in his hand, and just flips it and says, "We're starting over." And I just couldn't take it.
That was Born to Run?
Yeah, that was Born to Run. Right, we just went like this in the water, you know. And to me, that was my whole life went in the water just then. Right, because everything, I was my first solo shot. It was everything I had. And I just looked at him. He said, "We're doing the whole thing again."
Jeez.
And it was an incredible moment, and the way Bruce tells it, it's really more incredible. And I just, on the way home, took a couple of Valium and went to sleep.
Yeah, what else? Yeah.
That was in the movie. It's actually it's a ridiculous scene.
I think about all the people that you guys gathered together to participate in this, right? Other people that don't speak that often, right? Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine the time and the coordination it took. Who was your favorite supplementary interview in this? I love Snoop and the way he carries himself and the way he tells stories.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to see who was yours.
They all were so impressive, and I was shocked by all.
Well, most of them are great storytellers.
They're great. They're
you know what I mean? That's what they do.
Yeah.
You know, they're. Although my favorite,
who was your favorite?
You didn't ask me. I mean, I think as far as Rookie of the Year, it's Lonzo. You know,
Alonzo,
and,
yep.
You know what I mean?
From
when
World Class Wrecking Crew.
Yeah, when he's doing that, talking about meeting Dre and Dre getting the DJ.
And Groove and Confused.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was grooving confused. The first time, first of all, to have footage of the first time Dr. Dre ever DJs is a miracle. For me, that's my favorite part of the movie. There's a lot of great stuff in it, but that thing just blew my mind.
And also his skills at that point are still like,
Yeah.
people really can't even do that still, which is
I
nuts.
know.
Yeah.
I know.
No, he's beyond. People forget what a world-class DJ he was.
Another thing I got about this is, even though I know how talented Dre is, to get to watch it like that, it's shocking to me. Most people don't know how gifted he really is.
Was it the same for you? Was it the same scenes for you?
Scenes as far as
Supplementary interviews, the people that you had.
I gotta say, I was really listen when I'm sitting down with Bruce Springsteen or Stevie Nicks, who I had a poster of her when I was 5 years old. So they're all like, I idolize them all, you know. And I know Snoop for many years. He's a dear friend. So I don't have a favorite, but I will say most valuable player does go to Snoop, because in scenes that he's not even involved in, like the Tyrese crip walking Facebook scene.
Yeah.
His observations are, you know.
I don't know. Eminem's got some good lines.
Oh, Eminem.
Marshall
in part
Mathers.
4.
Marshall Mathers came up with some great lines, including calling me the Great Kazoo, which I'm not sure. Great Kazoo.
The Great Kazoo was from the Flintstone cartoon. He levitates.
You sure it was the Flintstones or was it the Jetsons?
I saw it. We had it in the movie. I think it's
One thing that shines, I think, is you mentioned Bruce teaching your work ethic, and I think a lot of us are aware of some of you guys' accomplishments. We see them all on display here, but I think this thing that shined out to me was your integrity throughout all the years. You feel like the same person from the moment that we meet you, all the way until the end. You steadfast with your decisions. You believe what you believe. How do you maintain that in an industry that's changing?
Well, that's a very important
daily
question, because what happened was when I was from Red Hook, Brooklyn, and then it became Carroll Gardens when I was about 16, so you know the area. And my first my first session was John Lennon, I did 3 albums with him. Then I did 2 albums with Bruce Springsteen, and I did an album with Patti Smith. So now I went from 19 to 23. And those were, remember, when you make an album with someone, you're with them 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. So that's a lot of time with those 3 people who are incredible people. So what you learn is you learn that it's not about you. You learn that there's these incredible talents out there, and you learn which side of the glass, if you're going to be in music, is really most important. You know, in the end, it's not the guy producing Kendrick Lamar. It's Kendrick Lamar. That's what's making the room unique. The other people help, but Kendrick is what's making it happen. And so I always took that with me. They taught me culture, they taught me taste, they taught me taste in music, taste in art. They just taught me how to react and behave. And it was something that's always stayed with me, you know, and those are, I came from nothing. How I ended up in that studio, you got to watch the movie. But but it's, I would say that that's the foundation of who I am. And John Landau, who's also in the film, Bruce's manager, was really helpful to me as a kid. Because I came as an ignorant kid from Brooklyn. And I thought everything was about me. You know, my mother told me everything was about me, and I just bought in, you know. And these guys, in a very gentle and sometimes not so gentle way, got me to see how things really operate. And it's not about you.
It's an amazing lesson. I feel like that lesson applies just the way you directed this piece. Unfortunately, I can't ask you guys any more questions. We want to get to some of the fan questions that they submitted.
Let's go.
So you guys that are tuning in right now, please continue to submit questions. We will be answering here live right now. So let's take a look at the first question. It comes from Ricky Brown. This one's for you, Jimmy. How did you get the idea to name your label Interscope?
Well, that's a great question because I had the idea to change it. The guy that came up with the name was Ted Field because he had a race car company. The guy that our founder was Ted Field, and he had this name Interscope. And I was making my deal with him to partner on the label. I said, Ted, doesn't this sound like a fluoride company or something like that? You know, and he said, I'll tell you what. All the points that we're arguing about, I will give away if you just let the name slide. So I can't take credit for Interscope. That's where it came from.
All right.
That's funny.
Let's see, the next question comes from Adam Weiss. What's the most iconic Stevie Nicks moment that you've ever witnessed?
Me or Alan? Me? I guess that's me.
That's a Jimmy question.
I would say the thing about Stevie Nicks, first of all, is her instrument. She has one of the most original voices, and still today in music. She has an original sound. So whenever she would go out to a mic, she would transcend everything and sing. And most of the time, I could have used any vocal that she did, literally, except that the words changed. She sings like Stevie Nicks all the time.
Wow.
She sings Happy Birthday like Stevie Nicks. And it's just that sound. And it's a miracle. Her voice and that sound is a miracle.
Okay, we only have time for 2 more questions. Let's see what the next one is. It comes from Doug Phelan. Jimmy, you've been in the driver's seat through monumental changes in pop culture. Who is the one artist you think changed the shape of the music industry the most?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, I'd have to say that it's a combination. Unfortunately, it's a combination because without Chuck Berry, there's no Beatles. But you'd have to say that the Beatles were ground zero for what we're dealing with today, and Chuck Berry, and then James Brown. So I would put all those 3 together to. This isn't modern music. You know what I'm saying? So I think you put those 3 guys in a box, and you come up with a lot of what exists today.
Okay.
Amen. Wow.
Yeah, I'm going to trust you.
Yeah.
And the last question comes from Amanda Megan. Jimmy, how has the evolution of platforms like Spotify and SoundCloud affected music creation and distribution?
Well, it's affected. I believe it's affected it in a mostly a good way, but the whole thing here is to get artists compensated fairly. Let's not talk about big businesses. Let's not talk about platforms. Let's talk about people making music, which is ground zero of what we all enjoy. So if they're not getting paid properly, they're going to get distracted. For example, artists right now believe that there's not a lot of money in the recorded music business. So what they're doing is they're spending most of their time on the road, and they're making records on the road. That's different than Marvin Gaye coming off the road and writing what's going on. So if there's certain things that are coming off the road and making music. The Beatles stopped touring completely to make their albums. So right now what you have going on for the most part is the opposite. Adele stops and records her records, you can tell. Ed Sheeran stops, records her record, you can tell. Kendrick Lamar stops touring, makes his record, you can tell. So what has to happen is there has to be financial reward and a business in making and having artists be encouraged to do that. Because think about it, if one artist gets discouraged, let's say Prince would have changed his mind, wouldn't we be in a different world right now?
100%.
Right?
100%.
And that's the thing, is that the pay tiers, you know, there's all that free music on YouTube. I know that's great and it's fun for people. But the fact is that it is not, everyone uses the labels as a way to hide behind that, but the fact is that's the artist who's getting hit the hardest. The new artists are just getting decimated in this world. And I hope that that the streaming services get good enough that people want to pay for them. And yeah, a lot of other people will benefit, but so will everyone else, because the music will get better and people will be encouraged. You know, like right now, if I'm a kid, I want to play basketball. That's where the money is.
Tell me about it, man.
But I'm like, music, holy shit, am I going to get paid? And, you know, I think that I'd rather go work for Snapchat or Facebook or one of these places, right? So that's my take on the platforms. I think it's about the artist. As long as the artists are getting compensated, without artists, I'm working on the docks. My father was a longshoreman. He had a job for me. I walked into a recording studio. I got lucky. Those three artists I just mentioned took me in and gave me a life. And I owe them.
It's amazing. Unfortunately, there's a lot more questions. I have a lot more questions, but we're running out of time.
Okay.
Is there anything you guys would like to share with the viewers ahead of the doc?
I would like to say there's 4 parts.
Yes.
Sunday, July 9th, 9 p.m., HBO, right?
Yep.
They're all dynamic and crazy and fun, and tragic at sometimes in their different ways. But get to part 3. There's the most Easter eggs in part 3.
So with that said, again, it will be streaming on HBO for one of the first times ever, the day on July 9th, Sunday. So
you guys can binge it.
Yeah, if you're like me, you like to binge watch, I suggest you do so. Once you start watching, you're not going to want to stop watching. So you guys remember Sunday, July 9th, or you can watch it the old school way, but come on, let's be honest, it's 2017. We want to thank you guys. We want to thank our panelists, Alan Hughes. We want to thank Jimmy Iovine. This has been amazing.
Great job.
This is an honor.
Good stuff.
Thank you all.